Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to
This is Nos Odietis. This episode of Nos Odietis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Odietis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A sideline fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ray Gibbs through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicola leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is going to
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
That Porter says cheated.
You want to win? This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
Welcome to another edition of Nos Odietis, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, Watson's Counter, and our subscribers. This is episode 447, and we're recording on Thursday, November 16th, 2023. I'm your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our producer, Lickett. Well, it's been almost a week since the Sounders advanced to the Western Conference semifinals when they beat FC Dallas 1-0 to win the series 2-1. But so we're going to do something a little different right now. Rather than spend a whole bunch of time dissecting that game, I wanted to ask you, Aaron, what were some of your broader takeaways? What do you think you learned about the Sounders during that series?
I think that more than anything, we learned that the Sounders can control games. You know, they played 270 minutes, and I would say for maybe 25 of them, Dallas felt like they had the upper hand. They made the most of those 25 minutes, you know.
They did. They did,
so
yeah.
Not to take too much away from them. And I came away, you know, it's not what you asked me, but I came away actually pretty impressed with Dallas. Like,
yeah,
they're a good team. And I think that the Sounders beating them as soundly as they did in the two games that they beat them is a testament to how good the Sounders team could be. Dallas had, you know, in that last game, they had one shot, came extremely late, was not much of a shot. And it's not like they were putting all this pressure on and the Sounders were just, you know, cutting them out at the last minute. Like, Dallas did not create anything in that game. The Sounders fully had their you know, their foot on the throat. So I think that the Sounders team, when they have a game plan, when they can stay composed, it's really, really, really hard to sort of knock them off their game. It's really difficult to break them down. And they're just really good. I think Brian Schmetzer, you know, I don't think he gets enough credit for his game plans. And I feel like that's a different thing than like X's and O's and tactics as they're typically spoken about. But I think Brian Schmetzer knows this is how we need to approach this game specifically.
Yeah.
And gets his players to buy into it really well. In the first leg, I think he felt like the Sounders needed to come out and be aggressive and set the tone, and they did that really effectively. In the second leg, I didn't have a problem with the way they approached that game. I just had a problem with some of the individual errors that they made, but I thought the approach was correct, right? They wanted to be aggressive. They just made bad mistakes in the course of doing that. In the last leg, totally the right approach. We are going to get a goal and we are going to completely take the air out of this game. And it worked to perfection. So I think that any concerns that I had about the Sounders not being able to succeed because they weren't going to have the right approach, they weren't going to have the right players on the field, they, you know, whatever it may be, right? Like all that stuff that seemed like a real concern in like July and August, I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like if the Sounders can perform to their capability, they can beat everybody left and they can beat LAFC. But yeah, but we also learned that sometimes they're not going to play up to their level of capability, which is not quite as rosy.
Yeah, I would say that I think the margins for the Sounders are pretty thin.
Yes.
When they are able to dominate, sort of dictate the play, they are really hard to beat.
Yeah.
Like they do have I think they have an elite defense. I think this defense is, and it's not just the 4 defenders that makes this elite defense. It's that everyone on the team is buying into defending.
Yes.
And that's Jordan Morris, that's Christian Roldan, that's Albert Rusnak. That's everyone on, like everyone out there is doing their part defensively. And I think that's what really makes this a good defensive team. But, they still are struggling to, like, they're creating chances. They're getting the ball in good spots, but they still don't have like a clinical finishing. They're not, I don't expect them to put up 5 goals on anyone. Like we saw Columbus, for instance, sort of like roll through Atlanta's defense. And I don't know that the Sounders are going to do that to anyone. They haven't, they got better offensively down the stretch, but they still, if they got 2 goals, that was still like they were getting 2 goals more often, but they weren't getting 3 very often. Like, I don't know if they got, I don't think they scored 3 in any game down the stretch. And so I think that's kind of just who they are at this point. But it is, there's something to be said about the job that Brian Schmetzer's done, because I think if you look at the roster that they are putting out there, you'd have a hard time convincing me that this isn't the best roster in MLS. Like, they might win MLS Cup. I don't think that's an outrageous aspiration. They might lose in this round too, but they could win MLS Cup, and I still won't think that this is the absolute best roster in the league. It's got some good pieces, and I think Brian Schmetzer struggled a little bit to find the right combination of players.
Yeah.
But to his credit, he seems to have found it. Like, whether or not it took him longer than we all wanted him to, this does seem like the right group at this point.
For sure. I think absolutely. And I think that it's easier to say in hindsight that I don't think we being me, and I mean other people as well, but I don't want to put this on you, but I don't think that we treated the decision to take the team away from Nico and put him on the bench, put Raul on the bench. That's a much tougher decision, I think, in hindsight, than to make. Because I think I'll raise my hand with that too. I agree. I think that we sometimes treat it well, and I think that's sort of our job, is like, sure, we are supposed to say this is what we think is the obvious answer, and we don't always worry about the ramifications of making that decision too early versus too late. But I think in hindsight, what we saw, like, it makes bringing Nico off the bench now way, way easier. Yes.
When you can point to 25 starts and say, look, Nico, we weren't getting what we needed from you here. You can be mad at me, but you can't really argue that I didn't give you a fair chance.
Yep.
And I think the same goes for Raul, is they gave him every opportunity to show that he could stay healthy, and he just couldn't. Yeah. And, I would hope that Raul, like, I still like to think that Raul is going to have a role to play down the stretch here, even if it's off the bench. But they would be crazy to be going into every week thinking this is we're only as good as Raul Ruidiaz can make us.
Right. There were times when that was unquestionably the right decision, right? And it ended up, paying off really well, more than a few times. But yeah, I mean, there's so much evidence that, like you said, that this is the group of players that you've got to ride with. And, to go back to something you said earlier, you're 100% right that when you look at the talent that the Sounders are putting out there, I mean, they're without their two of their DPs, their 2 highest paid players, the players that have been key to everything they've done, for the last 4 or 5 seasons, and in Nico's case, much longer. And, they have really talented players, right? Like, I think if you take this starting 11 and you make some tweaks to the depth and you add 2 designated players, maybe this is the most talented team in the league.
Yeah.
Especially the 2 designated players, that's a big if, right? Like if you just added two of the best players in the league to this team,
Right, yeah.
you know, so it's like, I think you're totally right. And I do think that you have to give Brian Schmetzer credit for how well they're playing, but you also have to give credit to guys like Josh Atencio and Jordan Morris, who have gotten this. I mean, Jordan obviously has started a ton of games this year, but it's different because it's like, okay, you're the guy now. You're the striker. You need to score the goals because Raul ain't going to do it. He's taken that chance. Atencio has been lights out. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say more. The thing about Morris is that he's just I think the thing that kept him from getting the trust of the coaching staff to be the number 9 was that he just didn't have that killer instinct.
Yeah,
and I don't know that it's always been there, but I do feel like during this series he played like a number 9. Like he played like he wanted the ball. He wanted to take chances. He wanted to be aggressive, and he just looked like a different player. And frankly, he's looked kind of like a different player ever since he became a dad, which sounds super cliche and silly, but it does feel like he's played with a different sort of, clarity in his game.
I think that the finish that he had in Dallas, the chip on the goal that got called back, he does not try to do that 2 or 3 months ago. There's no way.
No, I agree.
Maybe not at any point in his career does he try that finish, and
it's never really been in his bag. Yeah,
and he pulled it off. And I think that speaks to how the confidence he's playing with, and like you said, like there's something different about the way he's approaching it.
Yeah, if he's playing that way, I think he gives the Sounders a huge, a real chance.
Yeah,
between him and Rusnak, who I'm not gonna sit here and say he's their number 10 going forward, but he deserves a lot of credit too. I think he's been willing to do basically whatever the team asks of him. He's done it ably. He never complains. He will say where he prefers to play, but he's never sulking. He's never showing up anybody on the field. Right. And the situation he's in is not easy. Like he's got Nico Ladero there, who he's effectively displaced, and he's saying all the right stuff about how, like, I don't know if I'm the starter, like I'm just here trying to, do my job or whatever. And again, he's come on really, really strongly. He scored 2 goals in this one. One of them was a penalty, sure. But the goal he had against in the third leg or in game 3 was really well taken, even though he 5-holed the goalkeeper.
Yeah. I think that it hasn't always been pleasant, right? Like some of the stuff with Nico has been a real bummer. Yeah. But I think considering the realities of everything that's happened, right? Where it's just like Nico is benched, Raul is benched. The worst we've really had is Nico sort of letting on that he was a little frustrated with that and then being upset about the way the contract negotiations or lack thereof were handled. I think that does speak to the strength of Brian Schmetzer as a man manager, and also just to the character of the people involved. Like it has to be really, really difficult for Nico Ladero to go from this being your team and you're the talisman and you're the club legend to a guy that's coming in off the bench and is sort of in a lame duck situation. That's got to be tough, but he's never done anything but play his ass off.
Right.
And done whatever is asked of him.
And I'm sure he's not happy, and I'm sure he doesn't feel like he's been, like, I'm sure, like he said, he doesn't necessarily feel like he's gotten the respect he deserves all the time, but it's still sort of held together. And I think that like Brian deserves some credit for that.
Yeah. I think you have to give him credit for that. I mean, I think that Brian is one of those managers, one of those coaches that nobody is going to look at the way this team plays and say, this man is a revolutionary. Right. This man is a visionary. But there are a lot of really, really, really good coaches that's true of. And I think he has shown that he is willing to try different things. He's willing to be flexible. He's willing to do different things tactically this season. But I don't think anybody can question his ability to motivate the players, his ability to manage personalities. Yeah. This is just the last couple of months of this season has been I think, vintage Schmetzer.
Yeah, right. Where it's like you're not quite sure what he's doing, but it's working.
Yep, you just got to let the man cook. And I think that it wasn't that long ago where we were sort of almost resigned to him not coming back next year, and it's kind of crazy.
And right now, where we sit right now, it's hard to imagine that scenario.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's not, and that's, I think, regardless of what happens against LAFC, it's hard to imagine that scenario.
Yep.
I do think at some point, he's going to want to start to transition, but he deserves the ability to sort of do that on his terms, I think. And he keeps showing why he gets the benefit of the doubt. And I'm trying to I do want to point out one other thing from the game against Dallas. And it's the play of João Paulo, who just quietly seems to have regained, like, he's back to what he was. Like, I think this series really showed me more than any other time that we've seen him this year. He really does look like the 2021 version of himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at his injury, he obviously came back from his injury, but it's not uncommon for players to take about this long to really get back to their best. And I think especially, when players are not in their early 20s or early mid 20s, it can take even a little longer. But he has looked fantastic. I think too that he looks like his vintage self, but he's also not being asked to do as much as he was in.
That's true.
20,
no, that's true. Yeah.
And so I think that is definitely a part of it. But I think that's kind of the thing with this team and with this system, is that everyone is being put into a position that plays to their strengths, right? Like, Jordan Morris is really fast and can run all day. So they are going to put him into positions to get behind and put him and ask him to run at defenders all day long, to both in attack and in defense, defending from the front. João Paulo, all the things he's being asked to do in his position are the things he's best at and the things that he excels at. And he's not being asked to do some of the things that make it harder for him to do those other things.
Well, I think that's also what makes Josh Atencio such a good partner for him, is that he can do a lot of the running that João can't at this point.
Yep.
And, like the pass that he made to Rusnak was just so sublime.
Yeah.
It was, and that's like, he also had a couple decent looks at goal that he didn't finish. So maybe that's still the missing element from his game. But man, he was that pass was so good. He was dealing, he was intact. Like, he's still as good in a tackle. Once he's in the tackle, he's as good as anyone at coming out of it with the ball.
Yeah. I think, the thing that I love about Atencio's game as well is, like, he does all of the hard work. He's a great 1v1 defender. He's great. He's a great tackler. He can run all day. He makes João Paulo's job so much easier in that way. But then he also has this really unique wrinkle to his skill set that guys with that skill set don't always have, which is he does have this really great creative vision, as that pass to Rusnak was, really illustrated. Like, he can create, and I think that a lot of the time other teams aren't expecting him to be able to do those things, and it just makes him a really valuable player. Obviously, I think we'd all love to see him add goal scoring to his bag of tricks. I mean, that makes him even more valuable. But even without that, I mean, it's just, I think if there's one takeaway, we've talked about how valuable it was to learn something about this team this year. But I think if there's one thing that you point to and say, like, what is the unmitigated success from this year? It's that we found out what kind of player we have in Josh Atencio, and it's a really, really good, valuable player that I think is going to have a really good career.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see. He's currently with the U23s in their pre-Olympics camp. And this is the first time he's really been on when he was first signing with the Defiance, he was sort of in the youth national team picture. And for whatever reason, he totally dropped off their radar. And so he hasn't gotten a youth national team call up since 2019. And it had sort of been accepted that he just wasn't really seen as a like a high level prospect. And, I think at various times I've said, if there's one player who I think is going to spend 10 years in MLS or, have a long MLS career, it's probably Josh Atencio. But, if he ends up making the Olympics, you could see how that changes his trajectory a lot. Like, I don't think this camp is necessarily going to change it, but if he ends up in the Olympics and who knows, I mean, he is a player that has a skill set that I think is weirdly underappreciated. Like, I've always thought that he had a real high ceiling, but I mean, he's got a great body. He's got, he covers a lot of ground, reasonably creative. If he starts scoring goals, which, he hasn't done, but, he had I think he had 5 shots in the first game.
Yeah.
Which was a sort of a reminder that this is a guy who can get into dangerous spots.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're not scoring goals, if you were taking shots and giving the defense something to think about as a midfielder who is, I don't want to say a defensive midfielder, but as somebody who I think is largely there for stuff outside of the 18.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's super valuable. And I do think, I mean, not to sell any of these other players short, but the Sounders have had all of these guys come up through the academy. Obed Vargas, Danny Leyva, I think are the ones that sort of spring immediately to mind. And then Atencio was always kind of like you alluded to, like, I don't want to say an afterthought, but definitely like the one that was sort of like, oh yeah, and we've got Atencio too. He'll be a great rotational guy or whatever.
Right.
And I think at this point, I mean, I think of all of the young guys to come up, in the last few years, he's really surpassed them at this point, which is
I think he's had more first team performances that rate really highly than any, like, a lot of these guys have shown their competence. They're all, I mean, he's also 3 years older than a lot of these guys. So that's, maybe it's unfair, but if you look at his 5 best games, I guarantee those 5 best games are better than any of the other, Leyva, Baker Whiting, Obed, you go down the list. I think his, and that's fine, I mean, he's a player to me that the Sounders should be trying to build around next year.
Yeah.
And I think that alone, being able to say that about a Reed Baker Whiting or a Josh Atencio alone makes this, somewhat of a puts a lot, makes something real to come out of this season.
Yes, absolutely.
You throw in, if maybe Jordan Morris is a 9, maybe we do know the position that, like, we have a way forward with Albert Rusnak. There's a lot, like, there's some real positives, I think, to come out of this. But I think maybe that's a good place to call it a break. We'll come back, talk a bit more about this LAFC series. And you're listening to Nos Audientes. Watson's Counter wants to thank everyone for their patience, but now the wait is over. Located at 6420 24th Avenue Northwest in Ballard, they've reopened in a brand new location with the same bomb-ass coffee and the same dumbass vibes. You can still expect their classics like the gochujang fried chicken sandwich and Fruity Pebbles French toast, alongside their new soft serve program and their world-class coffee. Make sure to follow them on Instagram for all the latest and greatest. Welcome back to Nos Audientes. So the big game that is coming up is November 26th. That's the Sunday after Thanksgiving. So, we're still 10 days away, which I guess is one of the flaws of this current playoff system. Is it's broken up by an international break. Not really much to be done about that. I don't know. Before we get into the series or the match against LAFC, now that we've seen the first round, we've seen this best of 3, do you still hate it as much as you thought you were going to?
I don't hate the best of 3, but I never hated the best of 3. I think best of 3 actually is I never hated it. I like it now. And I really wish that the next round was best of 3 as well.
Right. Okay.
That's always really been my thing, is that why does the first round, the round where, I don't know, why is the first round, why do you care about not having a fluke result in that round, but a fluke result in the other rounds are fine.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me. I don't like it. But I mean, it is what it is, right? Like I'm especially pissed off if this game is a one-off because I'm going to be at the Depeche Mode concert, so I won't be able to watch it.
I know a lot of people going to this. Giovanna is also going to the Depeche Mode concert.
When I saw that that's when the game was going to be, or when it was going to be that weekend, I was like, oh, it's definitely going to be on the Sunday because but hey, maybe I can, maybe I can hang out.
I was hopeful that they would have had like a 4:00 kickoff, and then
that would have been perfect.
I know. Maybe you'll see Giovanna there.
Yeah.
But it's been, I think to me, one of the things that I think some people have missed about the best of three is I saw this a lot is a lot of people came away saying like, well, we ended up getting the result we would have had if it was just a two-legged series. And yes, actually, if all of these series, the way they stood at the end of the second leg ended up being where we finished. So I guess there's some truth in that. But if you look historically, 7 of the 8 top seeds made it out of this round. That's a 83% conversion rate for top seeds. Historically, during we had a lot of data on two-legged series in MLS. A lot. There was like 75 series. Only 54% of the top seed. It was basically a coin toss.
Yeah.
And this is, these are, this includes a lot of theoretically mismatched opponents.
Right.
And like the two-legged series to me is really bad in that way.
A two-legged series is great in a cup competition, like in something like the Champions League or Champions Cup. I think it's the perfect system.
Yes.
But in a playoff system, I mean, were they doing away goals?
Some of them.
Because in MLS the last time they had the two legs, right. I think they had stopped using away goals.
Yes, they had stopped using them.
So Seattle Dallas would have gone to penalties in Dallas, right?
Well, no, because the Sounders had one away goal, so they would have gone. Well, oh, you're right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Absent away goals,
right.
that would have gone to penalties. You're right.
So yeah, I mean, I think anybody who saw the first two legs would have said, man, the Sounders losing on penalties here is really unfair to the way this series is played out. So
right. No, that's a good point.
I like best of 3. I really do. I wish that the rest of the playoffs were best of 3. I understand why. I understand the logic better. I will say, I'll give you this. I understand their logic better, right? Of like, we don't want as many flukish upsets in the first round because more flukish upsets happen, in a one-off game.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that they're trying to correct for that in the first round. But then going back to the flukish, that's really my issue. And
they did. I think we may have discussed this, but they sort of did try to sort of split the baby, and they ended up with like I do think the best of 3 concept is sort of unfairly maligned. I think a lot of people are sort of like cracking on it just because it's not used in other leagues, but it's maybe. When it's like the playoffs are different than a cup, like you said, like they're just fundamentally different than a cup competition because you're not like the whole thing about a two-legged tie is that you're trying to eliminate home field advantage.
Right.
And that's not what you want to do in this sort of format. But that said, we are now through and we're looking at LAFC. They had a relatively easy time with Vancouver, although I think some people are maybe overstating just how easy they were tied 2-2 at the end of the first half and then sort of like boat raced Vancouver in the second half of their home leg. And then they won the second leg on a really, really, really questionable penalty.
Yeah.
I don't know. LAFC to me, like they have a lot of talent. And by that, I mean, Dennis Bwanga is really, really good.
Yeah.
And other than that, like I think if you and so far in the 2 times that the Sounders have faced LAFC, they were able to neutralize Bouanga, and if they're able to neutralize them in this one, there's every reason to think they can win this.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, we're kind of repeating ourselves a lot with this, but LAFC could absolutely win this game.
Yes.
Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, like, I am really confident that the Sounders are going to win this game, because I'm not. Like, I think I'd put it at slightly better than a coin flip odds for the Sounders. And that's mostly just down to home field advantage. But there's nothing about LAFC that makes me think, oh, we're in real trouble here. They're just like every other team in the Western Conference. It's like, yeah, they're pretty good,
Right.
I mean, looking ahead, not in the sense that I want to be disrespectful of LAFC, but it's like Sounders get through this, they're playing Houston or Kansas City, and that's another couple of teams. It's like, yeah, they're fine. I mean, Kansas City is shitty, but what I mean.
But even then, they like Kansas City has been the best team in the Western Conference since like May.
Yeah, so it's just like, like any of these teams could beat the Sounders, but also the Sounders could beat any of these teams. I mean, I do not remember a Western Conference that, like, there have definitely been times where it's like all the teams at the top are really good. 2014 is one that stands out. Like, the Sounders and the Galaxy were 1A and 1B all year long. This year, it's like everybody is like 3, like there's not a great team left. But everybody has something about them that makes you a little nervous. And in LAFC's case, yeah, it's definitely Bouanga.
Yeah, so doing a quick glance at LAFC's record, they had a bunch of games that they just blew the doors off the opponents.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth looking at who those opponents were. They blew the doors off Vancouver at home. Vancouver was not a very particularly good defensive team. Their one road win recently was they beat Austin 4-2. This was like a dead team walking that they beat. Then they beat Minnesota 5-1. Minnesota was melting down at that point. That ended up getting Adrian Heath fired. They beat the Galaxy 4-2. And then they have a lot, like, but most of their tough defenses they've played, like they tied St. Louis 0-0 on the road. They tied Philadelphia 0-0 on the road. They lost at home to Real Salt Lake. Like, the tough defenses they've faced have mostly handled them.
Yeah, LAFC is a team that can get a lot of downhill momentum.
Right.
Like,
yes, that's a good way of putting it.
Because if you are trying to play from behind against them, they are extremely dangerous. And
yes.
that's the worry, right? Is giving up an early goal and trying to have to play from underneath.
Although, like, that's kind of what happened to them. Well, it is what happened to them when they played at LAFC. They gave up that, like, first minute goal, and then that was it.
Right. Yeah. So it's, I think that I'm not necessarily worried about LAFC blowing the doors off the Sounders for that reason, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're a mediocre defensive team and you find yourself needing a goal, it can get tough for you.
Yes.
But the Sounders, we talked about this a lot over the last couple of months, but I think especially in the context of the Dallas series, the Sounders are a team that doesn't need to, like, they're not at their best trying to score when they're throwing everyone forward. They're at their best trying to score when they're trying to spring counterattacks. And so they don't have to sell out as much as maybe some other teams do to try to get those goals back. So I don't expect LA to come in here and put up 4 goals. I don't see it.
No, I don't think that's I think, like, this is a game, like, if the Sounders lose, it'll probably be like 2-1 or 1-0 or something like that. Yeah. Which would be, which is definitely well within the realm of possibility. But I could also see the Sounders, winning this one 1 or 2-0, or like I like, that would probably be the more likely outcome. It'll also be interesting to see just, like, how many minutes Bouanga plays when he's with Gabon in African Cup or African World Cup qualifying. Although everyone's going to have plenty of rest when they get back. So I don't know how much the international duty will play. But I think this will be a fun game. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a good test. If the Sounders get past this one, I really like their chances to go to MLS Cup against either, they'll face they'll host either Kansas City or Houston if they win. So that's I like these chances. If you had told me at the beginning of the year that the Sounders will be hosting LAFC and they'll have home field advantage through the Western Conference playoffs, I don't know. How do you wouldn't turn that down?
No. And I think too, it's something we haven't mentioned, but I think is worth noting is that Lumen actually does feel like an advantage again.
It does.
The Sounders haven't lost at home since August 20th to Atlanta. Feels like a lifetime ago. Feels like a totally different team.
Yeah.
Kind of was a totally different team, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
And I really think, especially against Dallas, you could really feel the Sounders home field advantage. And it's nice to have in a way that I haven't felt in quite a while.
Yeah. And even like the Galaxy and Vancouver, the Vancouver game ended 0-0, but like all four of their last 4 home games, I think have all felt like, like you could feel the energy in the stadium.
Field was tilted for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's probably a good place to call this. We're going to do a mailbag episode for the subscribers later in the week. So if you want to get that, now's a good time as any to get on the subscriber train and support. It is what it is that we're doing here, which has been really gratifying to see this kind of playing out and everything. One of this, I'll give a little bit of a plug to a story I broke this week that Stephen Fry has signed a 2-year extension with the Sounders. It's that kind of stuff that you're only going to get from Sounder at Heart. I think we have been actually cited as a source in the Seattle Times more times in like the last few months than we probably had been in the last several years. So I don't know. I'm going to draw that up directly connected to our independence. But joking aside, wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been a subscriber. This has been a really fun year for us. And I don't know. That's wanted to end with that. But thank you to our sponsors, of course, Full Pull Wines and Watson's Counter. I am Jeremiah O'Shan signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is Nos Audietis. Remember, you will never get alone.
We love you. Let's win another one.